it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me again today. Today I'm going to be playing with some embossing folders. Now it is really fun to get lots of different uses out of the tools that we all have in our stash. And when I was looking at my embossing folders, I really love the patterns on them, but I don't always want it embossed into the cardstock. I just quite like the pattern. So I'm going to be using my inks today to kind of almost stamp or get an impression or a print off of my embossing folder. So I'm going to start off today with some Wilted Violet and Picked Raspberry. I'm using Distress Oxides, however you can use anything you want. The normal Distress inks would work really well for this. And I did it with my pigment inks as well and they worked fine. I didn't add water to the pigment inks, I just stamped them as is and they worked really well. I tried my Catherine Pooler inks and they worked really well, and I sprayed water on those because they are water reactive. So I have just covered, I did both sides of this embossing folder because I wanted to use both sides, but you could just choose one if you wanted to. I'm going to be using some watercolor paper here today so that it stands up to the water that is going to be used to move the oxides around a little bit, and it is as simple as I pressed it down and I pulled it back up again. And don't get me wrong, these aren't the most crisp patterns, I guess, and perfect patterns if that's what you're looking for, but they were really fun. And then I basically went to town and just had a whole lot of fun with doing this technique on lots of my embossing folders. Now, there's kind of no rhyme or reason, you just have a play with it. I had lots of fun playing with how much water I added. So obviously a lot more water, I kind of got more of the watercolor effect and less crisp. And then if I had added a little bit less water, then I would tend to get more crisp, but kind of less color on the page as well. So I guess it depends on what your pattern is. For this one, I used Twisted Citron and Peacock feathers. And with these first few, I was kind of just using my ink pads to kind of pop them down. But if you were nervous about mixing the colors or getting a different colored ink on your ink pad, then you could also use some finger daubers or even just the mini ink blending tools or some cotton balls or whatever you had handy that you could pop some ink down with. However, on the left hand side of this embossing folder, I just did a 50-50 split. So I just did half color on one side and then half the Twisted Citron on the other. And then when I add the water, it kind of helps the two mix together a little bit in the center. Now, I didn't add very much water, so that one gave quite a crisp impression, but as I said, if you add a little bit more, then you obviously get a little bit more of the watercolor effect. So I'm sure that this is not a new technique, this is just new to me, and I was having heaps of fun playing with it. Just like I said before, if you didn't want to mix the colors of your ink pads, I'm using Tumbled glass here and Seedless preserves, which are quite far apart. The Tumbled glass is quite light and the Seedless preserves is quite dark. So I put the light one on first and then I just used my finger to kind of pop some onto the embossing folder, and I just kept my finger kind of nice and flat so that it didn't go into the little bits in the center of the pattern. But yeah, so you can do whatever you want to kind of make it work for you and see what you have in your stash to use to apply the ink. And even a braille would be really fun to kind of get a really nice blend in between a couple of colors. I didn't try that, but I'm just thinking of it now when I'm doing my voiceover. So yeah, just have fun with the technique. And I definitely did that. I think it's obvious at this point in the video that I was having trouble stopping and putting down the ink pads for a little bit. So I'm going to do this last one here with you, and you can see a couple of prints that I got off it already. And then for this last one here, I am just going to use a little bit of Shaded Lilac, which is just a really light purple, and then some Worn Lipstick, which is kind of a lightish pink. Use my finger to smudge them a little bit in the middle, and then add a bit of water. Oh, and speaking of adding water, actually, what would be really fun that I didn't try is adding some pearlized water, like adding some Perfect Pearls into a water little spray bottle and adding that on instead of plain water. So I didn't try that, but that would definitely be fun to try. So here are all the prints that I had a go at making. Now, as I said, the world is your oyster, so go for gold when giving this technique a go. but I kind of had them all spread out around me, and I was absolutely surrounded by prints, and I knew it was my time to finish. So these are some of the ones that I've got, which are pretty much mostly dry at this point. If not, there was a few splotches and things which I can dry with a heat gun, and you can kind of see both sides of the embossing folder there, which is also really cool to have both kind of sides of the pattern. Now, of course, once we've created all of these gorgeous backgrounds, I need to do something with them. So I'm going to turn one into a card today, and I had heaps of fun making this card. It was very kind of simple, but yeah, it's definitely turned out one of my favorites. And I think I will use some of these same backgrounds to create more of the same thing. So I have this penny black stamp here. It is called Peaceful Time. And I love these smaller stamp sets because the price point is just so much more affordable. So I'm going to use this gorgeous bird here, and I'm going to stamp it on a little piece of Bristol Smooth paper using some VersaFine Onyx black ink. Now I'm just using a nice black pigment ink because I want to emboss this with some clear embossing powder. Any clear embossing powder will work fine, or if you could just use some black embossing powder, and then you can stamp in just any sticky embossing ink as well. I am going to colour in this little bird, and I actually don't want the branch or anything that he's standing on. The reason that I bought this stamp set was because I loved the bird itself. So that's what I had been looking for in a stamp recently, and so I got this in over lockdown, and yeah, I was looking forward to using it. So I'm using some Zig clean color real brush markers, and this way on the Bristol Smooth paper they blend really nicely. So I kind of add a little bit of the dark color, and then I use a really light blue to blend it out, slightly lighter towards the bottom of the wing. Now, no fabulous colouring here at all. I'm also using a black marker, which is all I had, and then a blender pen to kind of make his little tummy grey. This is not a realistic bird, this is just the colour that I wanted my bird to be. And at this point I hadn't really decided which background I was going to use either, so I was really just playing a risky wee game of what I liked. And again, with colouring in this bird, you don't have to have the Zig markers. You could use any watercolour markers, any watercolour, any colouring pencils, any paints, any crayons, anything that you have that you enjoy colouring with, any Copics, whatever you find relaxing and fun, then go for gold. I am going to fussy cut out this little gorgeous bird. As I said, I don't need the branch at all. Even though the branch is gorgeous, I don't need it. Now this is something I also got in over lockdown, is these little scissors from Tim Holtz. I did have these smallest ones from him already, however they have gone walkabouts for the last few weeks, and I really love these ones for fussy cutting. So I got the new ones in, which don't have the serrated edge. His old ones have, the paper ones have one edge that is serrated and one that is a clean cut, and although you could just turn your scissors upside down and you would get the clean cut, I really like these ones with just a clean cut and no serrated edge at all. So these are my new little go-to fussy cutting scissors for now. And everybody kind of has a favorite pair, but a pair of fussy cutting scissors is a really good tool to have in your craft room. So I've cut out my little birdie, and I've pretty much cut off his toes, which I will replace later on, I promise. But I am going to add a little branch here as well. Now this is one from Alina Crafts, and I have just die cut out that branch, the longest one there, in some white cardstock. Now I just have a whole lot of scraps of white cardstock, so I just cut it out, and this one happened to be a 110 pound one, so it's a nice strong piece of cardstock, and I'm going to use some Vintage Photo and Mowed Lawn. Nothing special, just a brown ink and a green ink, and a finger dauber for each one to put the ink on. Now I started off doing the branch here, and then soon realized that it was going to be a little bit tricky not to get those leaves. So I am just going to tear up some little sticky notes, some really cheap sticky notes, and pop these on the little leaves, and this will make my life so much easier when I want to colour the tips of those branches green. Now I guess you could do them all brown or in any colours you wanted to, but I felt like it added just another little touch of colour to the project, so I did want to have the green in there. But yeah, you can see I was able to do the brown branch really fast when I did that, and then take off all of the little sticky notes, and I'm able to pop some green on. nice and easily. Again, just use whatever colouring medium you have handy. I probably could have used the zig markers, which I already had out, because there is no blending and no shading and nothing fancy to colour this branch. It's just making the branch the colours that I need. So I've finished up my wee branch there and it is all good to go. It was nice and easy. The finger daubers definitely make it much easier than getting in there with a blending tool. I'm going to cut down my little card panel that I decided to use, the pinks and the purples, and I'm just cutting it down at this point. I want to cut all 4 edges to kind of keep that nice pattern in the middle. So I wasn't actually 100% sure how much I wanted to cut off the edges, so I was kind of thinking and deciding as I was going for this part, but you can always cut more off, but you can't add some back on. Now this is a Technique Tuesday sassy birthday. This is a nice, again, it's a small stamp set, so nice and affordable. These are definitely the stamp sets that I lean towards. And during lockdown, I did purchase a few new stamp sets, just these little ones that I'm kind of showing you, and a couple of things that I needed. And so you will see these appear time and time again, and I'm sure you'll get sick of them as you have some of my last stamps, because when I buy them, I really like to get the absolute most I can out of them and use them over and over again. So I have just stamped out the nice plain happy birthday that is right up the top there on a plain white piece of paper, and then I'm just going to make it a nice thin strip. Then I'm going to keep that leftover white piece there because that will be on my card as well. I have some silver mirror cardstock, which I'm going to cut a few really thin strips. When I need really thin strips, I often cut a few because it's hard to get them super even, so I actually only need 2, but I did cut a few out. Any silver cardstock would be fine, it doesn't have to be the mirror one. And now it's time to just pop everything together. We've got all of our elements, and I popped some foam tape on the back of my inked embossing folder panel, and it's just foam tape that I am trying to use up, and I will pop it down right in the center. It's got a nice big border all around, and then that white piece that was left over when we cut the sentiment, that is going to go straight in the middle there, because this is quite a busy background, and with a busy background you don't want to lose your focal point. So by adding that white strip across there, it really means that you can focus on what's happening in the foreground whilst still enjoying what the background is. So I did cut down the sides of my little sentiment there, and then I remembered that I wanted to add the silver strip, so I put glue on the sentiment, then I've just popped it down there to the side. These silver mirror cardstock are adhesive backed, so I just need to peel off the adhesive from behind them, and then I will put one above and one below that main white strip there. I think I did consider using vellum as well to go across the middle, but I felt like, again, I really wanted the pattern to be blanked out for a little bit and not just kind of harder to see because it was such a busy background. So I have snipped off those wee tiny pieces there, and you can see that that adds a lot to it, just those tiny silver strips. And then to add on this really fine little tree branch here, I'm going to use my go-to glue, which is my Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish, and I pop it in these wee glue bottles. I have a video on my channel that shows you exactly how to do this without getting glue everywhere. It's not too messy of a process. And then I'm just using the little bird for placement. So I'll pop the branch across that nice white panel, and then the little bird there I am actually going to pop up on some foam squares and pop him right in the middle. But remember that I cut off his feet when I was fussy cutting him. So once I put him down there, I kind of bent his little legs back a little bit so that they sit on the branch nicely. And then I'm just bringing in the stamp to look at what his little feet look like. And then using a fine liner black pen, I will just add them back in. And in a second here, I will show you that you'd never really guess that they weren't a part of it. So they look perfectly fine there on the branch. And I don't think anyone's going to be looking too close at how they were put there at the little bird's feet. So anyway, I will pop my sentiment, which I already had glue on from before. And that is going to go right down the bottom. And that nearly finishes off our card for today. One final thing that I'm going to do is add a little bit of black glaze pen to the little bird's eyeball. I love adding this to the eyes and things of creatures. I find that it just adds a really nice little, very slight bit of dimension, but a really nice shine to the eye as well. That was my card for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope that you give this a go with your embossing folders. It was heaps of fun. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.